My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and today I've got with me Julie Heaton, who is an author and mentor. She is a certified health and wellness coach and a Reiki Master. Her 30 plus years as a corporate executive have culminated in a mission to help more people become their best selves. Her books, The Manifestor's Playbook, The Manifestor's Workbook, and her children's book series, The Adventures of the Fabulous Three, are inspiring and a roadmap to a personal growth. Julie's mentoring encourages you to lean in, do the work, and live your best life. So a big welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I was going to say, what came first, the kids' books or the Manifestor's books, or what inspired you to even start writing?
That's such a good question, and it's a little bit of a long story. I was in the corporate world for 30 years and a real driver, one of the A-type personality worked with is usually me and a bunch of men in a room. And I lost who I was completely. I sought a lot of outside validation and worked to get that and forgot who I was. At some point, I made myself physically ill because I wasn't listening to my intuition anymore. And I had to quit. So I quit without a big plan. And I spent a few months meditating and journaling, a lot of freeform writing. And at some point, I went to my husband and I said, I think I'm writing a book. And he was like, honey, that's awesome. Write a book. the, the funny thing is, I never considered myself an author. My sister is the author in the family, and that was not my title, my designated title. So it took me a long time to feel good about it and to own it. And so the Manifestor's Playbook came first, and it's what I did personally to find myself again, love myself, and validate myself in order to manifest the life I want. And then one day I was in the bathroom getting ready, kind of during the same time period, and a little bee flew in my window. And I wrote the little bee book. This came through me.
That's so beautiful. I love bees. We always rescue bees out of water and things like that, and they're always so grateful. And if you're afraid of bees, you don't need to be. Like, just, if you calm around them, they won't sting you.
Yeah, they just want to do good.
That's right. Exactly. So then you've got your little bee book.
Yeah.
and then
So I wrote several children's books. So I have The Adventures of the Fabulous Three, and it's The Magic of the Little Bee. That's the first book in the children's series. And then it's the A Case of the Upside Down Frown, which is I wrote before COVID, and it's all about how smiles and kindness are contagious, and you can pass it from one person to another, and how important it is to do that. And I use the words epidemic and pandemic in it before we were using those words. So I feel like that book was meant to be out there. And then I wrote Hector the Hedgehog, the coolest hedgehog in town, for my granddaughter who has really big emotions. And Hector learns how to feel his emotions, sit with them, but then some breath work to release them. So those are my kids'
love
books.
that.
And then I wrote the Manifestor's Workbook to go with the playbook for people that are more action oriented, want a workbook. And I'm working on my third adult book called Roar right now. And that's just about being in your power and using your voice for good, and how just how to stay in your power.
I love so much of what you just said. So, first of all, I love the theme of those children's books because I worked a lot with children as a speech language pathologist, and the amount of children that need emotional regulation. And also, my sons are quite sensitive to let them know that, it's okay to feel, because even as parents and adults, we're still learning that it is okay to feel, and
Yeah.
giving kids permission to do that as much as ourselves permission to do that is so important.
Oh gosh. As an adult, just a few years back, I really considered that getting angry was a bad thing, and the kind people don't get angry. And so if I got angry, I would like scold myself, like, okay, now okay, what do you have to do to be kind? Go through this whole thing instead of just feeling the anger and figuring out what's going on. Like, why am I angry, and what do I need to work on? I didn't use it as a message, a trigger to learn what was next for me to learn. You know what I mean? I used it as a disciplinary tool for myself. Like, oh, you're just not being kind enough.
Which
It's
then just makes
interesting.
the Yeah, I was going to say that just makes the anger even worse, right? Because you haven't fully met the anger with the anger, and then it just ends up as rage.
Yeah, it ends up stuck in your body, and it's just such a misunderstanding that any emotion we have is bad. We have them. We should honor them and learn from them.
Exactly. And like, I love too that you also wrote about the acts of kindness, because, and it's not even acts of kindness, it's just being kind, right? Like, there's this whole
Yeah.
movement about being acts of kindness. It's like, no, just choose to be kind, just
Yeah.
consciously choose to be kind every time, hold the door open for people, give them a smile. Like, they're free. They're things that are free. And there's so much evidence that has come out now, and I swear I've talked about this on another podcast as well, but we're talking about the Heart Math Institute has actually done all this research showing that when the person doing the act of kindness, actually, their energy and their actually health increases, as well as the person receiving it. So it's like both of you are getting the impact of just being kind, and I love
Yeah.
that you put that in a book for kids.
I always say if I had read those books as a kid, I might not have had to written the Manifestor's Playbook. And it's true, it's you're right about acts of kindness. It's not even it's not you don't have to think about them. You're right, it's holding a door, picking up trash, or looking someone in the eye, or telling someone they look good today, or anything. It's the small stuff and the big stuff that make a big difference, and both of your vibrations go up, and that's what we want ultimately. That's how we're going to change the world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's by spreading that kindness. And, there's often there was this clip I saw, it just popped into my head. And there was this little girl skipping down this alleyway. And she was just so happy. And she saw this guy. And then he started skipping down the alleyway the other way. And then another person saw him. And then they started skipping the other way. Because it is contagious if you're open to it. And if you're in a state where you're able to receive it, because if you're too far like depressed, or have like a lot of things going on, it is harder to see those acts of kindness around you, because you have to consciously be open to it as well.
It's true. You, it's true. When things aren't going well, it's time to turn to gratitude and thinking about what you have, and not what you don't have. And that's easy to say if you're not stuck in a deep depression. And I'll tell you, when I left my job and I didn't know what I was going to do, or who I was, or where anything, I was depressed. It took me some time. And what I just continually did was I sat in meditation. I kept writing. I kept up with my gratitude, even if it was, I am just glad to be alive today.
Hmm.
I'm glad I have some yogurt tea for breakfast. I just did the mundane, anything I could to shift. And I say in the Manifestors Playbook, I don't have it anymore because it just wore out, but I had this sweater that said happy on it. And when I was really down, I would wear it out. And you'd have, you'd have to respond. People would say to you, "Oh, I like your sweater." You couldn't. And I'd have to go, "Yeah." It just like kind of brought me out of this place.
I love that because years and years ago, and I wasn't in the happiest place, but I had this bright orange. I actually got it from America because I was traveling America at the time. This bright orange jumper, and it had a massive happy face on it, and it said "happy, happy, happy, happy," and everyone had to take notice of it because it was this big bright orange jumper, and I was
Yeah.
so disappointed when it wore out, and it just didn't. It was just you couldn't wear it anymore, and I was like, no, I love this jumper, but I so understand what you mean because when you were feeling down, you put it on and you can't help but absorb almost the energy that
Mhm.
was in the jumper when they were writing happy, happy, happy on it.
Yeah, and people that noticed it cut their energy coming towards you, it's it made them happy. And so it's hard to stay unhappy when the vibration around you is happy.
Exactly, exactly. So then you had your hedgehog book as well, and I almost had this image of the hedgehog every time the emotions get too big. It's just like shaking, shaking all the emotions off. And I haven't read this book, but sometimes you can feel like a hedgehog when your emotions get too big.
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of want to curl up
Roll
and
into a
and
ball.
be
Yeah.
prickly. Yeah, and it, it just we all handle our emotions different ways, and I think for me, my growing up was um, don't be a problem. Like people didn't want to deal with my emotions, so I learned how to live without having all these emotions outward. And I don't want my granddaughter to do that. I don't want my grandkids to have to live that way, and or anybody. It's just it's emotions are part of being human. I mean,
Hmm.
until we're fully enlightened, we're gonna be emotional. That's just the way it is.
Well, it's also what we signed up for, right? Like when you
Yes.
signed up for the human experience, emotions were going to
Hmm.
come with it. And I heard this term once, and I don't know where it was. I think it was a podcast I was listening to, and the person said, "Earth is the emotional university of the universe." And I went, okay, makes sense. And I almost started crying because it was like, thank you, someone's acknowledged it. Because at the time it was like extremes, and it can be like that. You can go through such extremes in a day because it depends what's happening and how your organs are discharging and how your body's recalibrating. And like you said, the more you can learn to feel it and accept it, that's part of being human. It's just such a important lesson to learn, and to start with children, that is even more important.
Yeah. And they're a clue to what's next for you. I mean, I learned that when I get angry or triggered, it's a really great clue what I get to work on next. You know, it just happened recently where I got triggered, and my first thought was, "Ooh," and my second thought was, yay, why am I being triggered? What do I get to open up to now? So, just if we work with our emotions, it just takes us further on our spiritual journey.
Yeah, my coach calls it compassionate self inquiry. So it's like, what does this
Yes.
mean, right? What does this teach
Mhm.
us, and what do I need to do? And he's like, the greatest gift you can do is actually pause before reacting, because then you're not in the initial ego phase. You're actually stopping and going, oh, why is this triggering, like you said, or what does
Mhm.
this mean? And just start to ask those questions, and you're going to actually come to the situation a very different way, rather than just being triggered. And it's funny, a lot of people can't handle when you pause either. They're like,
I know.
why are they silent?
Wait a minute. Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I learned to just say and then let myself process. It's a good way to get out of having to sit and sing, just accepting whatever they say. Okay. And then you have time to go through your process and figure out what you want to do.
Exactly. And then you're not reacting and then going, oh my gosh, why did I react that way? And why did
Yeah.
I let that trigger me so much? And just by having that pause and giving yourself that grace to have that small gap can be really powerful. And I remember I was listening to this little thing on Instagram, and there was this like really like multi-millionaire kind of person. And someone said to him, oh, what happens if someone disrespects you in the boardroom? nothing. He goes, what do you mean? I don't do anything. I don't say anything. And he goes, you know what happens? They normally crack first and then start to apologize and take back what they said. And he goes, and I haven't done a single thing. I just sit there in silence, and I was like, wow, how powerful. What a good example of just actually pausing instead of reacting. And, if we all kind of took that mindset, how different would humanity look?
Oh my gosh. Someone told me a long time ago, be the big dog, don't be the chihuahua. Meaning you don't need to bark. Just sit in silence and wait for whatever comes. You don't need to mouth off at everything that comes towards you. And that was really good advice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that part of the self inquiry, that's so big for me personally is when I start asking, why did I get so triggered? And oh, it's because whatever. And then I ask, is this even mine? Is this even my story?
Mm.
And a lot of times it's not. It's something that I filed away, that I've rerun from a parent, or even, it's not really even my belief. It's something I labeled as my belief. And that's powerful too, when you start asking, is it even my story? And do I want this story still? Do I want to have this story come up? And the answer is usually no. So then what do I
Mm.
need to do? But I found that a lot of my beliefs, a lot of my stories are not even mine. They're
Yeah.
just really not even mine.
And that is such a powerful question, because when I started doing some medical intuitive work, because I didn't know, I was like feeling other people's pain my whole life. Very
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing to discover that you are doing that. But the first thing I would start to learn was, is this pain mine or is this someone else's? And the fact I never thought to actually then extend it to, is this story mine or is this someone else's? Because as much as I was feeling other people's pain, you can feel other people's story. And we grow up
Yeah.
in a culture where we're constantly bombarded with stories and beliefs. And, like you said, from our parents, from, teachers, from school, from friends, like all these things. I used to have this thing against red cars. And if anyone knows me, I don't like red cars. But the reason was that my ex-husband and his family, they always had red cars. So I was just like, I don't like red cars because it just made me associate it with him. It wasn't that I had anything against red cars. It was just like, I just didn't want those memories triggered and I didn't want those things to come up. But it's just such a weird little belief. It's such a, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's where that came from. Now I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. It's so interesting how we as humans file things away as truth and then live with them, until we start questioning them. Like, even when I get irritated with my husband now, the first thing I say is to myself, am I really irritated with him? The answer is usually no. And it's usually nothing to be irritated at. Like I can walk myself back to a story of, um, oh, the husbands are lazy or what, like some story I had that just isn't really even true. And, but yes, that you're right. The first thing is silence, and the second thing is starting to ask questions, and it really helps a lot in every relationship, but mostly the relationship with yourself, because you aren't having to forgive yourself for something you said you didn't mean later. You know,
And if
you
you
don't have to
do,
walk
yeah.
back.
And if you do, then you just take radical responsibility and you just
Yeah.
own it. Especially I know kids are really good at triggering people. So if anyone's a parent listening, we understand. Julie's a mum too. We understand. And
Yes.
and they'll just keep pushing your buttons because they're little reflections of us. And then you'll get to a point and you're like, because I don't really yell, but then I'll get to a point and then I'm like, and then later I'm like, why did I do that? Or why did I say that? So then I'll actually go have a conversation with my son. I'm like, I really apologize for yelling at you, but when you were doing that, it actually made me feel this way. So then you've taught, emotional intelligence there, like, oh, okay, that's what was going on. It wasn't about him. It was about things happening for me. And then also we can talk through what the initial trigger was that he was doing in the first place. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you can foster this conversation. And a lot of times people are too embarrassed to take that back, or they afraid of the conflict that will come from it. And it's like, well, instead, what are you doing? Burying it deeper down. So I guess that's where you kind of look at it that way. And the more you bury emotions, the more they're going to come up as dis-ease in your body. And that is, for me, I'm like, I'd rather just feel it. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And I know, listen, when I was younger, my ego, I was so afraid to apologize to my husband when we get in a fight. And I would live on whatever I said. It didn't matter. I would live on it. And at some point, being right wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it for me anymore. And I realized my job, my love for him is to make him feel better, not worse about things. And do I really want to pick these fights that are just not worth picking? And so, yes, to all the parents out there and all the couples, believe me, I I've learned to walk back and apologize. And now I've learned mostly, and I'm not perfect, mostly not to say the thing in the first place. But that comes from a lot of practice and a lot of dedication. It's like anything else, like building muscles. You have to build this up in yourself to do it. And it's scary at first because you have to be really vulnerable to say, hey, I was wrong. Because you are opening yourself up to whatever comes next. So you have to be ready for it. But it it does get better if you keep practicing. I would say now I'm at the point where 98, 99% of the time, I can take a breath and think about what I want to say before I have to walk something back. But that was not always the case. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're so reactive and we're so, we get stuck. And if you can learn the act of deep conversation, that's such a powerful tool to actually listen to somebody rather than
Yeah.
just being ready to react to somebody. It makes all the world of difference rather than sitting there waiting for your turn to have, your fighting words or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just taking the time to really hear somebody. And that's all we want, all of us, just to be seen and heard for who we are and loved for who we are, without someone constantly trying to change us or have us go in a different direction. It's it's all we want. People that act out are usually it's because they haven't seen or heard. They have all these repressed emotions and anger stuck in their body. And as you know, you just said it either turns into disease and or it shows up in really horrendous ways outworld, in the world.
Yeah. It's tragedy. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
tragedy.
yeah.
Yeah,
A- And I love that, like, we've been talking about being seen and heard because I feel like that's the theme of your next book, right? With the raw, like,
it is.
roaring
Yeah.
out your inner power. So, what a nice segue into that.
You just made me seen and heard. Yeah, the Manifestor's Playbook and the Manifestor's Workbook are really, they could have been called the Little Book of Self-Love. They're all about how to love and validate yourself so that you can believe in yourself and you can manifest the life you want. Roar is kind of the next phase, which is once you love and can validate yourself, then how are you going to use your voice and stay in your voice and in your power? How are you going to show up in the world and live your purpose? And what is your purpose? What is your superpower?
Yeah. And I love that because that's what I'm all about. I actually empower mums to find their voice in business, family, and their health as well as for themselves because, it's so, especially from a parent point of view, we so
Hmm.
often put our child's needs before ours nearly all the time. And we think it's a selfless act, but it's actually a deprivation to ourselves most of the time. It's like, oh, I'll just ignore, and from working with parents for years, I'll just ignore my health because I've got to take my child to this or do this or do this. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm really unwell. It's like, yeah, you've been unwell for weeks, but I'm glad that you're actually doing something about it now, and also being in such a patriarchal society, which is nice to see that starting to shift now with the energies astrologically too, which is really cool. But you as well, from a corporate world, like you said, you lose yourself who you are. And from owning a business myself, you have to step into this male kind of energy that doesn't necessarily align with you because you're playing the game. And it's like, and if we could actually step into our true feminine power and realize we don't have to do that and actually play our own game, you would have a very different looking society.
Well, I could have been. I think about it like if I could have figured out who I was at that time. What happened for me is I jumped into the corporate world pretty fast, got promoted, I just did this whole thing, but I never discovered who I was. So I was just lost from the get-go. If I had known my power, oh man, I could have led consciously and helped build companies that were, extraordinarily soul based and economically based. And um, I want to help not just women, but men do it too. I want to help people realize that they are here for a reason. Their voice is important and unique. We're all different. I mean, we all have something to offer. It's not like anybody else, but we have to know who we are to do that. You can't offer a unique anything unless you know who you are. So you're right. It's just been I'm so grateful for all my experiences. I wouldn't be here today without them. I have no regrets. I just think about these young women going into corporate America, and I would like to help them have both things.
Exactly. And you can. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, like
Yeah.
you can have both things. And if something doesn't align with you, or that corporation you're working for doesn't feel right, you can go start your own business and you
Right.
can run it how
Yes.
you want to, and
Mhm.
I guess that's, everyone's like, oh, but it's so hard to run your own business. Yes, it is, but it's harder to let your soul be sacrificed by putting up with things that don't align with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. But like I said, by the time I left that career, my soul was just depleted,
Done.
and I depleted my body too. So I totally agree with that. I think you can have it all. As long as you're true to yourself, you can have it all.
Exactly. And there's no reason you can't, because we've been so conditioned that we have to be in a box or that sort of thing, whereas we're infinite beings. We can have anything that we want.
Yeah. 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 I just wrote a chapter on it, about fitting in and trying to, we spend a lot of our lives trying to fit into society, to family, to our roles. And when we start to step into our own power and realize who we are, it shifts the whole box. And then everybody in the box has to either figure out if they're going to raise you up, or if they're going to try to pull you back, or if they're going to just move away. The whole box shifts. And so when you start to make some of these moves, you're going to move a lot of other people with you, whether they want to be moved or not. And
Yeah.
that is that's can be scary, it can be sad, it can be wonderful, it can be all the things. But again, as long as you're staying true to yourself, it's all worth it.
100%. And, a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people I coach, they're so afraid of pushing people away. And I'm like, well, they're not meant to be in your life anymore. And it's really scary to that. Like, I've had
It is
those
scary.
conversations with my husband, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. Are you coming along? Like, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. You either get on board or you don't, like, so,
Yeah.
and it sounds really harsh, but at the same time, when you shrink yourself because you're worried about what someone else might think, that itself is an act of not listening to your intuition and not following what's right for you. And then that can lead again to disease, tragedy, and everything else. The more you numb things, you actually end up with numbness in your body. So it's really interesting if you allow yourself to just be and be brave. It's about having courage. Like you said, it's about roaring and having courage.
Yeah. When I Yeah, I mean, there's so many things about this subject. We could talk for hours about it. My husband isn't on this path with me, but he supports my path. He's a wonderful man, and every time I say to him, like, I came home after a event and said, I think I want to go to India, and he was like, great, and I had to, for me and my husband in my relationship, it's enough for me that he supports me and in my journey in what I want. And so I support him in his. But there was a while there where it was really frustrating to me. Like, I wasn't staying on my own plate. I was trying to change him. Like, well, he needs to be on this journey with me. He needs to be, why isn't he want to know more about this? And I had to go back to, you know what, right now, this is what's happening. And you either accept and love him for who he is and what he allows you to do. There's nothing I can say to him that he's not going to say, honey, that's great. Or you have to get out of the marriage. You can't keep pushing this thing. You can't, I was creating all this resistance that didn't need to be there, trying to get him to go with me. But
Hmm.
in reality, he doesn't need to. We have a great marriage. Has his own thing. I have my own thing, and we have our things together. You can find those common grounds too. But there's other people in my life who were important to me who were just are not part of my life anymore because once I made these shifts, there was no common ground, and the and I had to release them, be grateful for the season we had, and release them out of my life. So I think there's a lot of different things that happen when you start to shift.
Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes you don't even consciously realize these people have fallen away till you're like, they're going, huh, what happened to that person?
I haven't talked to them in like 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I do this thing where I scroll through my phone and if certain names stick out, I'll actually just message them, even if I haven't spoken to them for a bit and go, hey, how are you? Because sometimes it's nice to know someone's thinking about you.
Yes,
And
that's really sweet.
yeah, and anyway, and this one, and it was so funny. I feel to share this. And I messaged this one person, and she's like, "Oh, I'm really good. How are you?" And we're having this full conversation, and then we organized coffee, and then she sent me these pictures. I was like, "Oh, are these for me?" She goes, "Yeah, it's just between us, and like, what do you think?" And I thought, "Oh, maybe she's asking me like intuitively or energetically." Anyway, so we have this full conversation, and then she realizes it was the wrong Catherine. Like she thought I was a different Catherine. And then she's like, "Oh, I'd still like to have coffee." I said, "Well, I booked you in my calendar. We can still go." And then we met and we thought it was the funniest thing. And we actually had like this really powerful conversation because we were meant to meet at that time. But
Yeah.
it was, she's like, "Why did you message me?" I said, "I just did." I just felt and it was just simple. She's like, "Oh, okay." Like people think there's a motive behind it, or sometimes it's like people just genuinely care. Like it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, I was just talking to someone this morning about caring and kind of being present. And one of the things I'm working on and struggling with is social media and how to be present in the moment and also be on social media. And this week I had kind of a big event, a book signing, and I I didn't I took one picture, and that's only because the mom said, "Can I take a picture of you with holding the book with my kid?" And I said, "Yeah, if you could take one for me too." It's the only reason. I thought, man, this was such a great opportunity. I could have done this. I could have done that. But my motive was to be there with those cute kids and talk to the parents and enjoy the conversations. And I just didn't, it doesn't come into play for me
To
to
take
make it,
photos.
to monetize it. Yeah, that way. And so I know it's a this and that. I have to get better at that. There's just no, I've got to find a way to do it. But it just, that reminded me of that because just being there for people and being present for people just because, just texting someone out of the blue just because it's beautiful, it's just a
Yeah.
nice thing to do. Yeah.
And then what you said about social media. So I broke up with social media during the pandemic and everything because I was like so over it. And then I'm like, oh, I need to get back on if I want to start reaching people, So I actually meditated with the energy of social media. And I sat there and I'm like, right, you and we haven't got a great relationship, but I need to come back onto you because you're a front door for me. Like I need,
Yeah.
I need to use you as my storefront. Anyway, and then I sat with it and I made sure not to put it on my main. So I've got two phones, like a work phone and a personal phone. And I made sure not to put it on my personal phone. I did all these things to make sure that it doesn't suck me in and I get stuck doom scrolling. And if I find myself doom scrolling, I'm actually really good at pulling myself back out because I have stuff to do. I don't have time to sit there for 20 minutes scrolling like that.
Right.
And and it's funny because every day I'll connect with 10 strangers, and the amount of people that are like so wary because you're genuinely interested in what they're doing, or you're genuinely asking questions. And I was like, they're like, why do you need to know this? I'm like, well, I like connecting people. Possibly I can work with you. That would be great. But also, I like connecting with people, and I have a podcast and I never know where I'm going to meet somebody, so it's like all these things. And I was like, if you just shut me down, like, how do you know that's not an opportunity? So it's, it's better to be curious, right? Than actually just shut things
Yeah.
down. And
Yeah.
what I've learned to do with the photos is I will just sit there. Like the other week on Sunday is our family day, and like we went to this really cool place. I'm like, and I was so inspired. I could see so many posts, right? And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to take all these photos that I can see I want to take, and then the phone goes away. Because like you said, being present is your greatest gift sometimes. And, if you're not present at that book signing and really engaged, then people aren't going to feel you. They're just going to be like, oh,
Right.
all she cared about was taking photos. So I guess you just find maybe that 5 minutes, take your photos and then move on.
Yeah. You know what? I do. I need to accept that it's part of my life and figure out a way to fit it in. I don't sell through Amazon, or I just choose not to. And so it's really social media for me is the outlet. So if I'm not doing the thing, then there's no door opening. So I'm kind of closing my own door on me. There's some resistance there I got to figure out.
Exactly. Try
Hmm.
meditating with social media. It's really fun and a really
Okay.
interesting journey. I have to
I
say.
I believe me, I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to do it. Yeah. I've got to
um,
find an answer to this.
exactly. You have to find your own way to make peace with it.
Mhm.
And, it's just, it's interesting, and I feel like it won't be forever, but currently in this stage of humanity, it's the current way to connect with people, right? So it's just, finding what
100%.
works.
Hmm.
Yeah. So as we finish our time together, because like you said, we could talk about so many different things, but we have to finish up. So if you could heal,
Oh,
if you could heal or change something in the world, Julie, what would it be?
I would start with healing individuals. I truly believe if everybody loved themselves, the world would be a peaceful world. There's love and hate don't exist together. So if we were all in love with ourselves, we would show up in love.
Which is beautiful. And how can people find you, Julie? We were just talking about social media. Feel free to drop it now.
Yes, I'm at hellojulieheaton.com is my website, and on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm Hello Julie Heaton.
Okay, beautiful. I'll make sure to include those in the show notes so people can find you, people can get your book, people can learn a bit about self-love, and definitely when your book Raw comes out, I'm sure everyone will be waiting for that too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.